that, the sheriff offered me a job with the sheriff's department. I told him I would take the job, but with the understanding that I was never to stand desk duty or any prison duty. He hemmed and hawed and then agreed to it. For the next 3.5 years, I worked the 7 to 3 car, that's 7 at night till 3 in the morning. 2 of us in the car, and we were the trouble car, and we were able to get into almost everything that happened in Shiawassee County. I liked it. I also put together a
Those are good years for me too, because we were racing motorcycles at the time.
I also put into that a system of pulling narcotics raids, and developed a narcotics strike force. Not the ones that go and make the bad buys and things like that, those are the ones that are on TV, but the guys that are gathered into the squad room and are no longer able to make telephone calls or talk to anybody, and the raid is explained to them, and then you go out and you make the raid without any contact with the outside world. And we developed techniques for that that had not been practiced before. One was a police officer who became quite famous, had gotten nailed in the face by a bad guy in New York City, and the bad guy got away because he didn't know it was the police breaking in the door. So I changed the program from, we no longer snuck in on the house. We no longer went in plain clothes. We came up to the house, surrounded the house with a bevy of black and whites, and threw the overheads on and turned the sirens on. And then we had to, by court order, we had to knock on the door before you could go in and read the warrant to them. So we developed a technique on knocking on the door with a 6-pound sledge, which worked pretty well because one knock and you were in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would read till everybody on the ground. They all get down on the ground because we motivated them. Most of the guys on the entry crew carried 16-gauge double-barrel sawed-off shotguns. That's a hell of a motivator. Mm-hmm. And they would right away run to the bathrooms, and most houses in Michigan have crawl spaces. One of our officers would take on the dirty deed of going under the crawl space to the trap in the toilet and undoing it and putting a bucket under it so that we could catch all the stuff that was being being flushed down the toilet. We were very successful. And then I was, at the time, I had been a distinguished shooter for handguns for several years, and I was assigned as the range officer to the Mid-Michigan Police Academy as an additional duty. All police departments throughout Michigan, except for Detroit, had to go through Mid-Michigan Police Academy in order to get validated and get their license as a sworn police officer or sworn officer of the law. I was put in charge of the combative measures class and physical fitness. I also had an interest in kids, so I started a class up at Owasso in the gymnasium teaching judo to the kids, and gymnastics to the ones that didn't want to take judo.
Yeah, I remember I had like a trampolines and stuff.
I had a trampoline with the safety.
I'll go visit and hang out and do that stuff. I had to play the judo part.
It was quite successful. After 3.5 years of doing this, I got orders from the Marine Corps to go to Great Lakes for reevaluation on my physical conditioning and to see whether or not I was able to go back in the Marine Corps. They sent me an addendum to the letter stating that the Marine Corps was going to permanently retire me at such and such a percentage. And I didn't think it was fair. So I got a lawyer and went to Great Lakes and sued the Marine Corps to take me back in. I went in front of the board, and the board was a colonel, a couple of naval captains, and some lesser known stars of the military that stood there and listened to my story. And the colonel read from my records there. He said, I see you've had these duties, and he read off these different jobs I had. He said, you moved around a lot. That's a lot of jobs in 3.5 years. And I said, Colonel, those are all concurrent. I held all those positions concurrently, all at once. He dismissed me from the room, took him 10 minutes, and they called me back in, put me back on full duty. But I did have to take a drop from, I didn't consider it a drop really, but I had to go from captain to commissioned warrant officer 3. Same pay grade, but I couldn't hold the command. He went back in the Marine Corps. I did a 1.5 years at the Corps at Camp Pendleton, where I was, first when I got there, they put me in charge of a huge warehouse. It was a computer run warehouse. It was extremely modern for the military at that time. Remember, this was 1974. This warehouse supplied everything throughout the Marine Corps. We had about 115 troops that ran the warehouse, and I was in charge of the whole damn thing. Well, I'm controversial anyway. When I went in and walked around my first inspection of the warehouse, I saw all the desks and all the chairs and all the coffee pots and all the cigarette ashtrays, and I had all of them removed from the entire warehouse. That raised a lot of hell. I had to go and see the colonel. And I told him, Colonel, you give a staff sergeant a desk, he's got to have a chair. As soon as he has a chair, he has to have an ashtray. As soon as he has an ashtray, he has to have a coffee pot. Once he's got the coffee pot, he has to have an audience. And the audience come from the guys that are supposed to be picking parts to supply the rest of the Marine Corps. So we don't have any desks or chairs in the warehouse. He laughed and went along with it. A few months after that, I got called down to Naval Intelligence, and they had worked their boat pertaining to my police records and background to have me transferred to as a platoon leader for the base military police. And I was on that about 6 months, and then I was given the position of assistant provost marshal, because I worked for a colonel. Assistant provost marshal of the New River Air Station, where I can continue to make a questionable reputation. I then got orders from headquarters Marine Corps transferring me as the OIC, or officer in charge, of the military police liaison in northern Okinawa. That would give me command of all the Marine military police that were in Okinawa, on the northern part of Okinawa, as well as being the chief liaison between them and the Japanese. Really choice duty. It was traditionally a company tour, which meant I would be in country in civilian housing with my wife and family for from 2 to 4 years. And I was overjoyed. And an addendum came down from the Marine Corps stating it would be unaccompanied.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in the neighborhood had unaccompanied stuff, and we were living in the base housing, and their dads were gone for 2 years at a time, 18 months at a time. Then they'd come back for a little while, and then go right back out to some other. Right.
Well, Mom had a lot of health problems at the time, and I put in a letter requesting that it be changed back to accompanied, since that was a traditional accompanied tour. Got a negative on that, stating that my TDRL, temporary disability retired list, had counted as an accompanied tour. Went in to see the Colonel Finian. Great guy. He made several personal calls to headquarters Marine Corps. Called me in the office, sat me down, he said, "Gunner, hate to tell you this, but you pissed some people off in Okinawa, and they're fucking with you." I said, "Okay." He said, "Can you retire?" I said, "Yeah, I can retire this afternoon." He said, "Well, I suggest you do so because you've reached your terminal grade and they're going to continue screwing with you." So I went over to the hospital, requested a physical, failed the physical, was put on no duty, and 2 months later I was out of the Marine Corps on a full retirement.
Then where'd you go? You go right
Yeah, from there I went, I got a job offer from, what's his name?
Talking about the first place you went,
The first place I got the offer.
Huron Valley Steel, or what? That wasn't Huron Valley
First
Steel.
one I went to was in Texas for the little guy who went and ran for president, became a manager for GM. When his engineers got taken in Tehran, he ran his own security unit into Tehran and freed his engineers from the jails there and brought them out by himself, since the State Department didn't seem to be able to do it. And
Yeah, I forget his name. I see his face right now.
yeah, he was quite a character, quite a guy. But they didn't pay enough for what they wanted. And I got an offer from Huron Valley Steel, which wasn't that high a prestige job, but they paid a whole lot better. And it sounded a whole lot more exciting.
That was in Trenton, Michigan.
Yeah, Trenton, Michigan. I got to do cross-country escorts for precious metals. People don't realize, but in every car that gets crushed in the United States and salvaged out, there is approximately $12 worth of change in that car. Fritz Enterprises, who owned Huron Valley Steel, did realize that. And they had a big belt with water spraying down on it and lights spraying down on it, and a whole bunch of pickers on each side picking out nickels, dimes, quarters, and throwing them in big shit cans. We got face value from that, from the Federal Reserve in New York City. I would get a call at night, put together a crew. We would rent a U-Haul truck or a Ryder truck or a Hertz truck, run it into the factory, fill it up with shit cans full of money, run a chase car and a forward car, and we would drive that sucker into New York City and deliver it to the Federal Reserve. And that was fun. So you got to choose your weapons and so on, and we get into the city and then check into the airport and check the weapons in with the pilots. Get fly back to Detroit, collect our weapons, and get a taxi back to work.
I'd take you back to just kind of the beginning of some of that though. It's still in Owasso and stuff, and it's just a good thing for me because I'll bring that because we used to in California. We would go out to these places where the kids were riding their motorcycles out, at the racetracks and stuff, and I wanted a mini bike pretty bad. And then we moved, and then one day I'm in Owasso, they're on, I think it was Main Street there, we had that shop next to us, a big long driveway. We're on this, in a house with a good sized yard near an apple orchard, and my dreams of owning a motorcycle had continued up to then, and I was told that if I saved enough money and so forth and so on. So I kept my money, every bit of it. If I was given money like everybody else, like a quarter and stuff to run up to the store and get candy, whatever. When everyone else is getting candy and stuff, I would put my quarter in this thing or in a drawer or whatever. Or I'd tell my mom to keep it and so forth. Anyway, it was about half the value of the bike is what I was supposed to be responsible for. And then one day, I think it was 1969, because I was 8 years old, and you called me into the garage. I was out on the front yard. I remember I was on the front yard because the septic system wasn't so great, and it was always really green grass over there. It was all wet, and we had to, in order to play out there, we had to stay away from it. We had a dog and stuff. Anyway, I get called into the garage. And I come running into the garage to see what you wanted and stuff, and there you were standing there, and just inside of the garage was a little mini bike with a metal plate for instead of a headlight, and it was sitting there up on a center stand, and it was a model of bike called a Scrambler, and it was by Rupp, which is the name of the guy who ran the company. And that was my first motorcycle, and since 1969, when I was 8 years old, I had steady ownership of a motorcycle from that point up and until this day. And that was my first bike, and I ended up racing it, and you ended up working for the place that made these things.
Yeah, prior to getting to be a police officer, I had a dead period in there where there was no work. So I was a fairly good bike mechanic, and I took a job with the Honda distributorship there. And Rupp opened up a new distributorship, and I went to work for them as a parts manager. Well, Moose was learning to ride the bike. He had a friend that was quite good on a bike, and we decided to put together a race team.
Dean Lepard at the time. Dean Lepard was my race partner, yeah.
Well, Dean's dad was a good mechanic and a good welder. And I was fairly good with the mechanics. And we turned out the Cates Lepard race team.
Yeah, well, to be fair, we won a championship and everything. Raced the first year. It was iffy, and you always eat dust your first year. That's what it was explained to me. The next year, I think it was 71 was the year where we did real well and took a first in the state and a second in the nationals. And Dean took he took a couple in that, he took a lot of, it was like 2 or 3 state and a couple of national ones at that race at the time. And then you got twisted out of a job somehow with Rupp. They did something kind of funky, and then that's how we ended up spray painting all the bikes black with no name on them except Kate's Lepard.
Yeah, we were by the second years of the boys racing, people liked the way that they handled themselves. One, they could race real well. 2, we put together some awesome bikes. And before every race, I taught them to go over and meet the other guys that they're going to be racing against and shake their hands and wish them luck. After every race, taught them to congratulate the other guys on a good race. And if they won, it was because the bike was good. If they lost, it was because they made a mistake. Sponsors like to hear that. And suddenly, there's halfway through their second year of racing, they were fully sponsored by Rupp Company. Each one had 3 bikes, and everything was paid for. And he did real well. Did real well. They won continuous 30-some trophies there.
I had 43.
Yeah.
43, and only 10 of them were below first place.
And suddenly we had a very famous mini bike racing group. One of the guys, by the way, that did beat Moose was Jeff Ward, the guy that's driving race cars now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he came out from California. Jeff Ward actually raced modifieds and open class. He had, I forget the crazy bike he rode, but he was a little short dude at the time with freckles.
He was small.
Yeah, and he went on to become like a legend in motocross. I mean, the guy was awesome.
Well, he was sponsored by Honda. That helped.
Yeah, well, he was awfully good then, and he's awfully good all the way through. But he wore almost like flat track leathers back in the day. But we were still racing mini bikes, and they were already on mini cycles.
Right.
They were quite modern. And then the dad would always get on this kick about how he had us talked into having short hair and being super squared away and so forth. You know, little Marine Corps shadows coming up. But we also wore denim jackets and jeans with our heavy boots and our helmets, because, you know, you put the money into the bikes, safety gear, and these guys are all from California show up. They're on like miniature motorcycles, and they're really fast, okay? So I still took, on the class I dominated all year, I only took a second because I had a bent shaft.
Because somebody screwed with your carburetor.
Well, somebody screwed with all our carburetors. You barely got it, and the bike would barely keep up, and it was all I could do to squeeze out second in a class I dominated all year. And then, but then I jumped on Dawn's little bike, and I flew on that little bastard.
We took Dawn's, that's Moose's little sister. She had a Sprint motorcycle. It's a little kid's mini
Little
bike.
tires like this here. Yeah.
We took that, and Lepard and I tore it down and put the modified race engine from Moose's bike in it.
Now realize this is a busy time, right? When they started on that, beer was still allowed in the pits and everything, and they're drinking beers and having at it, but all the bikes got screwed with, so Dad and Mr. Lepard had to go through and systematically not only perform that job, but they had to square away the carburetors, because they didn't even do it to just us. They took a screwdriver to a lot of people's machines, and everybody all night long, there was nobody sleeping, because these guys are over there just running these bikes hard, dialing them in, and what they would do is they'd get them started and they're sitting there just running. But when you cranked on it, the little carburetor had to be tuned all the way up through, all the way, and so even if it idled, it might not run at full throttle. So I had to mid-range, idle, and top end had to all be dialed. So all night long, these guys are up there. Dad didn't sleep. They converted the one bike and got all the other ones squared away, so Dean and I would both have all our classes ready to race. And so he hadn't slept that night. And that was a big day. You're up quite late, sitting around fires and stuff, and they're working all night. That was pretty wild. The one thing I remember, I was standing beside, there's two things, they're crystal clear that were just events. I remember the pits real well, but Mr. Lepard was with you, and I had come off the line on one of the races. And we ran those little engines so hot that after they shut off, they wouldn't start up again. And they would have to be replaced. Well, I had done well, and we didn't normally run heat races, but they had heat races. So I won that heat race, and I came off, and we had to get back on the line. They ran another heat race, had to get back on the line. Well, we had 2-3 minutes to get on the line, and they would call it over the thing, right? And we're supposed to line up and get ready. Dad and Mr. Lepard take this motorcycle that just came off the line, won a race. It's hot. It's making noise, tink, 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 because it's that hot. It's blowed up. So he gets under there, and Dad and Mr. Lepard jack this engine out, loosen the belt, take the assembly off the side of it, throw the engine off to the side. Mr. Lepard puts the new one in. Dad's straddling the bike the whole time, throwing the bolts in, get the belt on, put the foot on, shove it forward to tighten everything up. Boom, 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 boom. In a matter of minutes, I'm sitting there jumping up and down with my helmet on because I've only got 3 minutes to get up to the line. They fire this thing up. It was pull start at the time. Pull start it while it's up on the center stand, like this. And I was told not to let it go below so many RPMs because it might shut off. Because they didn't have time to do all the tweaking and playing. So I go up there and take this motorcycle and get it online with minutes. And I came back after the race and did well in it. And Dad told me that he never saw that engine again.
No, couldn't find the engine.
Somebody said, hey, I picked it up and left with it. Had Delorto carburetor on it, custom fit. It was hilarious. I'm in maintenance now, and I get teased at my job because they tell me I'm so old, I don't know computers, and I can't remember anything in classes now. So, because I didn't have the internet and everything to learn from like they did, they teased me. They said, that means you had to learn everything for real. So you had to learn everything for all those years so that you could have a job in a modern shop like this, and they teased me like that. Because I learned my trade in the driveway. As little of it as I used to do, you know, because Dad would say, if you want to ride them, you got to work on them. I learned how to drill and tap a hole and all the little minor, I thought they were minor jobs. Turns out they're all the fundamentals that are extremely important in maintenance work. How to take care of things and so forth. And that's where I learned my job.
Yeah, we would take a 3.5 horse Tecumseh lawnmower engine, and in my garage I would tear that sucker down to nothing. It turned 3.5 horsepower. I would do all of the grinding work.
Well, that drill.
All of the polishing and everything with hand drills. And then we would use carbon paper, cardboard.
No, it's all, we would watch every Thursday night. Kung Fu came on. Thursday night we did two things. Kung Fu came on at 9 o'clock. I was allowed to stay up late because next day is school day. And while we watched Kung Fu, our tradition was Dad had these pieces of oak wood, which were real flat, and he would tack on emery paper.
That's it.
And we laid out a Marine Corps blanket, and we'd have the heads off of a whole bunch of engines. And he would oil up the emery, and we'd sit there watching Kung Fu. He said, always in circles. He says, never go like in straight lines. Because if you go in straight lines, and it's how I learned concepts of engines and how I understood compression. If you went in a straight line, you would